Okay, we're back, part two.
Okay.
So now we're going to start discussing how you guys, then your parents, how they left Europe and how you came to America.
Daddy's story. Daddy's story is a great story.
Oh, yeah.
He told us once when we were sitting shiva for our mother, the gather around story of how he left Europe. My father always had great stories to tell anyway.
May I interrupt?
Go.
He said, we were sitting shiva. You and Bonnie had been invited to some simcha. You couldn't go, but the three boys went. And he said, now that the kids are not here, I have a story to tell you.
No, he said that he had to leave because he had taken over the business, making Slivovitz. He was moonshining, not paying taxes. And they caught up with him, and that's the reason he had to leave Europe.
That's right.
Now, the story we had, now, I was...
When was this?
Probably in 1931, when I was...
A year old.
I was, what, a year old? I was probably a few months old,
Maybe a
6
few
months old,
months old,
whatever.
yeah.
I don't know when during the year he left, but I was not a year old when he left, from the stories that I've heard. Now, the story I've heard was that he took the boat from... They took a boat from Hamburg.
Who's they?
I think he went with a friend of his, and they wound up in Uruguay.
You know why they wound up in Uruguay?
Because they couldn't get into the United States.
They couldn't get into the United States, but there was only a group of men that had gone to the yeshiva with him in Europe, or with his brothers that were in Montevideo.
Uruguay. That's how they got into Uruguay.
Sure, they went to where there were other people that they already knew.
There were men in the shiva with Grandpa,
Or his brothers.
or his brothers.
His brothers.
Or his brothers.
I always got the impression that Uncle Vilmos and Uncle Yoji were the only ones who went to yeshiva after grade school.
Okay, yeah, because Papa had no more than an 8th grade bracket.
That was in Tushnut.
Okay.
And the others probably only went to 8th grade. So he made his way, although I have a card, Tucky, before she passed away when she was sick, I guess she was going through her things and distributing them, and she had a card that my father had sent her. She was a little girl from Spain. From
You know what?
Spain.
Ships could very well have taken that route through Spain or
They would have not gone through Gibraltar. That makes sense.
Well,
whatever. He wound up in Uruguay, and we joined him in 1934.
So wait, so you guys lived in Plopush alone?
No, in my grandmother's
The whole
house.
family was there.
My uncles were all there.
Yeah,
Malvin was there, yeah. So it wasn't alone.
wasn't alone.
It was
It
with
wasn't that he was abandoning his...
No, I meant with Grandma.
Yeah.
Yeah, with your mother.
With my mother and the extended family.
Right.
Extended family was all around.
But she stayed in Plopush
Yes.
with her husband's family. She didn't go back to wherever her family is from.
No.
No, we did not go back to
Bogomir.
Bogomir. Well, she had Beartooth. She didn't have anybody. Aunt Esty and Aunt Rose were in America already. They came in 1922.
Sure, they were here already.
They were here in 1922.
Albert was here already.
Well, but she had
1930, I think.
she had Malvin,
Huh?
Malvin.
and
Malvin was my father's sister.
Oh,
And she
sorry,
didn't live in the same
Beartooth.
house. Yeah.
Beartoosh. I'm sorry, I meant
I'm not
Beartoosh.
quite sure where Beartooth was living. She may not have been living in Bogomir after she got married. I don't know.
Right.
We don't know where she lived.
Okay.
Was Bogomir close to Plopush?
They're both close to the border between Hungary and Romania. Yeah.
Well, Klopish is
A little bit further.
in Transylvania, which goes back and forth between Hungary and Romania over the years, and Bogomir was always in the
Always
Hungarian
Hungary,
part.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's near, Bogomir was, from what I'm told, is near Debrecen, which is the
Bigger city.
it was a city about 100,000.
So how did she support you when?
We were
Sustain
we
you.
were part of the family. Whatever the family ate,
Right.
we ate. And Aunt Esty and Aunt Rose, periodically, according
Send
to
money.
Mother, would send some money and also packages. Mother talks about fabric being sent for her to make clothing. Remember, they're all men, other than the grandmother. And my mother could sew. My mother was, had learned how to sew. To make clothing for us, but in her anger, the story went that she had to use the fabric to make shirts for the brother-in-laws. And the chocolate, well, never mind. That doesn't have to go on the
Fine. Okay, so
Our mother's complaints.
say it again.
Our mother's complaints.
Yes. So she came then in 1934.
We left in 34,
We were here in
heading
America.
for South America.
Now the three of you were all born in Plopish.
Yes.
So you're the oldest.
I'm the eldest.
It's always impolite to ask a woman her age,
82.
but 82. And
Born in 1928. I was
Yeah.
born in 1928.
so you were all born very close to each other,
Yes, 14 and a half months apart approximately.
approximately.
Yep.
All right. So Lillian is 81,
was born in
and
1929, and I was born at the very tippy end of 1930.
right. Okay. So and then in 1934, was Grandpa still in Uruguay?
It was in Uruguay.
What was he doing there?
By then, he had already started a kiosk of selling fruits and vegetables in the city market. An aside, when I went to Uruguay, I did go to the city market. Did I tell you? Anyway, and I didn't know which stall he had. My memories of it are much different. Today, about the only thing, they had 2 stalls functioning that sold some food. But there was still a sign saying kosher basar in Hebrew, kosher oaf. So the kosher butcher, etc., was still there. And they still had a day school. So my memories of a day school still are correct.
I have very few memories of.
We
I have
were
no
3 years
memories
old.
of Plopish. I have very few memories of Montevideo in Uruguay.
I will make a comment that I'm not sure at times whether I truly have memories or I remember what my mother told me and therefore I can visualize what I remember.
Uh-huh. And so you have no idea where you lived in Montevideo?
Yeah, we had an apartment, and I think we took in boarders.
Well, it was a building. It was a whole building my father had bought with a kitchen. He had a
bought the building?
Yeah, he owned it. With a
mogul.
kitchen. There was a hired cook. And I'm not sure they were boarders in terms of actually sleeping all of them,
And people
but
came to
being
eat.
fed kosher meals.
Kosher
men.
meals, some men who were single men came to eat, I guess.
Yeah.
How was he able to buy a building?
By the time we left, he had 2 of these stands, vegetable and fruit stands, in the city market. So he must have been a fairly good businessman. Yeah. I don't remember it being rental. Oh, do you remember the roof of that building?
No.
At least in those days, in Uruguay, because there were so many bugs in a tropical climate, the buildings were built on stilts, so there was always empty space. So you climbed up into the building. The main hallway, I remember a main hallway with rooms on either side, had a glass roof that could be rolled back. Sukkot, my father would go out and get zach, put it over there, and we had an indoor sukkah. I don't know, it really meant.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure it meant.
But I remember, that roof being rolled back and the zach being put over there.
And so you went to day school in Uruguay.
I have to comment of my father. I'm 6 years old, and he said, we're in South America, you speak Hungarian. We're in South America, you'll learn Spanish. We're going to go to America, you will learn English. The one language you will keep with you wherever you go is Hebrew. And he enrolled us in a day school. All 3 of us, including you.
Yeah,
You don't have memories.
I have only about 3 memories that I remember from Uruguay. 3 events. One, I remember my mother being in a bed and the doctor must have come to visit her. Did she have a stillbirth?
Pardon me? Either a stillbirth or she had a hysterectomy at that time, yeah.
Yeah. And no, she had a hysterectomy here in America.
Well, she referred to women's problems, so.
And then
A miscarriage.
I mean, we're told. My recollection is that there were 2 other children born. One died young, and one was a stillbirth.
Well, the stillbirth, I think, we're talking.
Did you have that? Did you know about that?
I don't remember any other. I remember her being in the hospital. Yeah.
But I remember being told, I forget by whom, that there had been, I think there may have been a child before you, a boy.
Yeah, that I know, and a child after me, by the way, after you read.
After me, yes.
Yeah, so my mother had a number of
Children that were
these stories
they were born
you-
stillborns?
The stories we heard were the same.
Yeah. In that instance, because my mother was hospitalized, my father had the business to take care of. So friends of his, 2, a husband and a wife, literally moved into where we were living. And I remember being woken up in the morning to go to school, and I got angry and I cursed them. In Spanish, they repeated the story to my father. The one and only time I remember my father ever laying a hand on me in punishment. He spanked me to the point that I couldn't go to school the next day because he was so angry that I wasn't appreciative of someone taking care of me and instead cursing these people. By the way, he hated cursing. He would not permit any of us to use any words that implied cursing. Absolutely.
He used a few choice words in his older years.
Am
I right there? Am I right, Bonnie? I think so.
Maybe he had those small strokes that we were talking about mother having.
So but he always had the intention of ultimately going to America.
Absolutely. Well, I think that was also my mother, because I remember my mother saying she wanted to leave South America where either you were a maid or you had a maid. There was nothing in between. And we had a maid. I remember the maid with a 12-year-old son. She actually took us to where she lived in this one-room apartment. I don't remember her name. I kind of vaguely remember, but I remember drinking for the first time sweet bread, and then the mate, in gourds. It's a tea, green tea in gourds with straws. And if you were wealthy, you had silver straws. If you weren't wealthy, you had wooden straws. But it was a bitter tea, and then you ate the sweet bread with it. You didn't sugar the tea at all. But that was South America. The other thing that she said was that in South America, if a woman was walking alone with a dog, that was an indication she was a prostitute. And she just didn't. This woman from a village that may have had 250 people at the time had this somewhat feminist ideas that she wasn't going to bring up her daughters in this environment. And her sisters were here.
I'm sure she wanted to come here because her sisters were here.
I think she wanted to come here even more.
So how'd you get here?
By ship.
By ship.
How'd you get to Uruguay?
By ship.
There were no planes.
No, I know. Maybe you have memories.
Well, now I've crossed the equator.
We did not swim. So.
Three times.
No,
4 times. I've crossed the equator 4 times.
Was it a freight ship? Was it a
No.
passenger ship?
The first one was a regular passenger ship because it had dining rooms, and there was a kosher dining room on that first ship, which I think was called the Mauritania, but I'm not sure. Yeah. Mauritania, and I think it was out of Hamburg as well. Had a kosher dining room, and my poor mother was sick as a dog. Smooth sailing, she was sick. And a very nice man saw these 3 little kids, and he was going to help her out. He was traveling by himself. He took us to the dining room for breakfast. And remember, my mother is seasick, and we come upstairs, and she said, down to the cabin, what did you eat? And we described what we ate. He took us to the tray stand. And she was very polite, asked him to come and talk to me. And she very politely said to him, we're Jewish, where there's a kosher dining room, you're very nice, but could you see that somebody takes my children to the kosher dining room? And people did. They took care of, other people took care of us.
This was the trip to Uruguay or
the trip to
America?
To the United States. We stopped here in the United States for 3 months prior to going to Uruguay. And Uncle Lipo wanted to adopt your father. And my mother's answer was, how can I show up, to my husband with 2 children that I gave one of them away?
Well, there's a picture of us with Uncle Lipo, Aunt Esty, Aunt Rose,
and Uncle Albert.
And
he wasn't married yet. Yeah.
And that was on your visit. You visited here. You only had a tourist visa, so then you had to leave.
Oh no, but we
By the way,
we were kids.
Mother, which I now have. Mother's silver plate that had the K initials on it.
No.
Well, all right. That was a gift from Aunt Esty's friends in Indianapolis to Mother on our visit, which I thought was, yeah, that's where she got that silver plate.
I have 3 memories of South America, only 3. One was suddenly going into this place. It must have been a school with a lot of children around and thinking, gee, it was awed by how large the building was. The other memory I have is going to shul on Shabbos, carrying the glasses of an older religious man. He wouldn't carry his own glasses, So there's another little boy, and I took turns carrying his glasses. And my memory was that I was always dropping them, and the other kid was not. And then I have the memory of running from my father's stall, wherever his fruit stand, wherever it was, the city market, and running back home because I had to go to the bathroom. Those are the only three memories I have of South America. And I remember the boat going up. I remember stopping. It must have been in Sao Paulo, where we got red
We
bananas.
stopped in Trinidad too.
I don't remember.
Yeah,
Do
stopped
you
in
remember the
Trinidad.
red bananas? We had red
sure,
bananas.
Sure.
Was it Sao Paulo? Do
I
you
think
remember
so.
where?
Yeah, we made a couple of stops. I remember Trinidad, but you remember the red bananas. I remember the huge, to me, they looked like mountains of coffee beans at the port, waiting to be loaded onto ships to be shipped where it was, possibly the United States. The other memory I have is friends of my mother's and father's offered to take the three of us to the beach. By the way, I got to think it was the ocean. Montevideo is not on the ocean. Montevideo is on the river, La Plata, the silver, and that, one more memory I just remembered. Anyway, and instead of staying under shade, remember we're very close to the equator, I got so badly burned that my mother had me sitting in a tub filled with vinegar and water, trying to ease some of the pain. The other memory I have is the only time that I claim to have seen a president of the United States. Franklin Delano Roosevelt came, if we left in 37, it could have been in 35 or 36, in a warship. I remember this big gray warship coming up the river to Montevideo, because Montevideo had a harbor.
Buenos Aires.
Pardon me?
Maybe it's Buenos Aires, because Montevideo, that River La Plata is between Montevideo and Buenos
He
Aires.
came up the river
To Montevideo?
to Montevideo. Buenos Aires is on the ocean. Yeah. And as I said, the only time that it came that close to a president of the United States, that he came to pay a political visit to this country of Uruguay. By the way, I'm almost sure that I'm saying it correctly. Uruguay was one of the most democratic countries in South America, the only one that now has a Holocaust memorial right on the river, beautifully, beautifully done. And Nazis did not come into Uruguay after World War II. Brazil, Argentina had lots. Somehow, I've never read that any Nazis landed in Uruguay.
That we know of.
That we know of. Huh.
And then you came to the United States in 1937. And Uncle Lee Portonetes, he brought you here? They sponsored you?
I think they may have helped pay for the steamship tickets, but I don't think they paid for the whole thing. I think
I didn't mean economically. I didn't mean economically. I just meant you couldn't get into the country. Unless...
Well, my guess, I've always speculated.
Yeah, you're right.
No, I've always speculated that what happened was my father got Uruguayan citizenship, and there were no quotas on people from Latin America.
I disagree.
You disagree?
You know why?
Why?
Because Pop didn't travel with us. We were on Mother's passport as Hungarians. Pop...
Romanians.
No, Mother's passport as Hungarians.
Oh,
And Hungarians were considered more Western to the United States than Romania, which was restricting the amount of Eastern European Jews who were coming into this country.
Well,
We traveled
they didn't
separately.
restrict Jews. They restricted...
All immigration. I didn't say Jews. I just said Eastern European. Did I say Jews? I didn't mean Jews. Just Eastern Europeans. After the flood of the the Eastern European Jews that flooded this country in the 1890s, 1900s, 1910.
Also the Italians, the
1928.
restrictive immigration laws were not aimed at Jews alone. They
No.
were aimed at, there was a flood of Italians, there had been before that flood of
Irish.
So.
Yeah.
Does either one of you remember the story about Grandpa burning his passport from Uruguay?
I
Or
heard
throwing
about
it out the train window on
No.
the way to Buenos Aires?
No.
I think we left from Buenos
Well,
Aires.
he did, because he told me that
He
he
told you
threw, that he wanted to get rid of all of his papers that had to do with Romania,
Right.
and he just threw them out the train window or burnt them or something, and claimed that he had lost all of his papers in the war. And that when Este wanted to bring them in, you then came in as Uruguayans.
Okay.
Uruguayans.
But
I presume, but I have
Mother's
nobody ever
story-
told me one way or the other. I don't know.
Mother's story, if I remember correctly, is that we didn't travel together because Pop had to wait longer for his visa. Not much longer, you know, a month or so. And the Hungarian visa came through more quickly.
And then so you came here and you came
We lived with Aunt Esty and Uncle Lipo for a year.
in
No,
Indiana.
the three of us.
The three of us.
My mother and my father were in
We
New
were in
York,
New York, we were in Indianapolis.
non-English speaking and running a grocery store.
Did you
Right.
speak Hungarian or Spanish?
My parents.
You guys.
We
We-
spoke Hungarian. If we
Well,
wanted to,
Aunt Esty tried to get us to speak Spanish, and she told us if we spoke Spanish she would let us go to the movie on Sunday. But we didn't speak Spanish.
Pop,
We lost. I lost. I don't remember ever knowing Spanish.
Oh,
must
I
have,
did.
but
How did they up in Indiana?
pardon me?
How did Uncle Lipo and Esti end up in
Because Uncle Lipo had a cousin, Sam Frankovitz, who was already there, and I think Sam was married by this time. Sam was a good 30 years older than Uncle Lipo.
The story I heard was from a guy named what's his name again? I just told you, Siggy.
What you call it? Weiss. Zoltan Weiss.
No. The one whose son is now very involved in the day school.
Haston.
Not Haston. No.
That's Weiss. Peter.
Peter. Oh, Peter is Weiss.
Mhm.
Oh, so it was what was the father's name?
Zoltan.
Zully. The way the story I heard of how Uncle Lipo got here, I heard from Zoli Weiss. Zoli Weiss's brother had been a close friend of Uncle Lipo's in Europe. And the two of them made a pact that one of them would come, and it was Uncle Lipo who came, and that when he accumulated enough money, he would send money to bring his friend Zoli's brother over from Europe. Well, Uncle Lipo, the way the story I got, I must have gotten from Zoli Weiss because I never got this from Uncle Lipo. When Uncle Lipo first came here, he worked in a meat plant in Baltimore. That's where he developed the shoulder.
Really?
The problem with the shoulder.
You know what? That was inherited because he has a nephew that has it. Jack Frisch
Well,
has the
that's
exact
right.
same
And
disformity.
then he went to Indianapolis, and the story that I've been told, probably by Aunt Esty or by him, he went to Indianapolis, you said, because I knew he had cousins there. He must have gone because he had a lot of cousins there. He had a number of families that were cousins of his. And he started with a fruit stand there on the 28th.
No, not a fruit stand, but literally a push cart selling
cart.
bananas in the summer, the story goes, and potatoes in the winter.
And he worked his way up. He eventually bought a truck and started a little store. And there was a shidduch. Aunt Esty was in New York. He was in Indianapolis, and there was a shidduch made.
You know who that shidduch might have come through?
I have no
Vicki Isaac is from New York.
Yeah.
And her family, there could have been some kind of connection between Vicky's family and Aunt Rose and Aunt Esty.
Why would there have been a connection?
I don't think
Who's Vicky Isaac?
Vicky Isaac. One of the families that Uncle
family
Lipo was
distance
related to were the Isaacs. And they had children about our age. And I remember when we lived with Aunt Esty and Uncle Lipo for a year. We went to school in Indianapolis. I started public school in Indianapolis. And that's how I got my different names. Aunt Esty, I was Gubby. My name was Gabor in Hungarian. After all, I was born in Europe, and they gave me a European
And Esty
name.
didn't choose those names, by the way.
No, wait. No, not that she chose the names. But then when the school I remember was diagonally across the street from where we lived.
That's right.
Aunt Esty lived on one corner. Uncle Lipo's supermarket was across the street. And diagonally across the street was the school.
And the fourth corner was a warehouse that he owned.
Fourth corner was a warehouse he later bought. Later bought in the 40s. So when Aunt Esty enrolled me in school, they called me Gubby, was the diminutive of Gabor. So when Aunt Esty enrolled me in school, she probably enrolled me as Gubby. And they wrote it down as Gobby. So I was Gobby until I finally decided to change my name to Gabriel because I didn't want to go through life with a name like Gobby because all the kids were calling me Garbage Kid.
Your name was never Gabriel?
No.
You made it up?
I translated Gabor or Gubby, whatever it was, and I decided to take the name Gabriel.
The story that I have to tell is my aunt had the same black woman as her maid, Louise, since Louise was 17 until Louise died. and it was Louise who decided that we should become more American. And I was Avi,
So she
Eva in South America, Evelyn in the United States. Lillian was Lily, I think, both in South America and Europe, and she became Lillian.
Lillian.
Yeah.
Because of this maid.
Yeah, yeah. Oh no, the maid was my aunt's friend. No, seriously.
No, I mean,
They-
she's the one who decided on the names.
That's what my memory.
Well, she didn't decide on Gabi
No, no.
as an American name.
No. But I thought she chose
Ancestry
Gabriel.
enrolled me
But
in school.
Well, how old were you when you decided you wanted to be Gabriel?
When I was about 8th grade, 7th, 8th grade.
Huh. So you lived for
Or
a
maybe
year.
Younger, 6th grade. All through when I went to public school in Astoria before I went to yeshiva, through 5th grade I was enrolled as Gabi, Gobby.
see,
Really?
I didn't know that. I thought that he became Gabriel that year we were in Indianapolis.
Oh no. I decided on Gabriel. I remember deciding on Gabriel, and I went to a library near the yeshiva. I went to Torah Das for about 2.5 years, and I went to the library and I decided on the name Gabriel, and I wrote it down, and I spelled it Gabriel, and the librarian looked at me and says,
Are you sure?
"That's Gabriel. That's how you spell Gabriel. This is how you spell Gabriel." And I thought the way she showed me.
So you were in Indiana for a year.
Yeah,
Yeah, approximately,
Indianapolis.
right.
And then why'd you go to New York?
We went to join
But,
our parents. Our parents, I guess, was somewhat.
Oh, just the three of you were in Indiana.
and my
Oh,
father-
and Grandma and Grandpa were in New York.
Trying to
New York,
trying to
trying to
earn a living.
And where at this time were Aunt Rose and Uncle
They
Dave?
lived in New York. They lived in
And
the
Rose and
Bronx.
Uncle
They
Dave-
lived in the Bronx.
And Rose and Uncle Dave
Uncle
lived in
Albert were already in Indianapolis.
Indianapolis.
Uncle Albert lived in Indianapolis with Aunt Ed?
He had been there. He got married by that time, and for a very short period of time, he worked for my uncle Leopold.
No, not very short. He worked for Uncle Lipo for
A couple of years.
a few years.
Yeah.
Few years.
Yeah.
Into the 40s.
And then they had an argument over Uncle Albert working Shabbat, and his very understanding brother-in-law.
Is that what the argument was?
Yeah, over Shabbat. And Uncle Albert said, "I won't work." And that's when he started to sell liquor. Became a
He
liquor
became a
salesman.
liquor salesman for a wholesale house.
Yeah.
And but then he moved. He was in New York at some point.
He moved to New York much later, when we were in our...
No, Uncle Albert never moved to New York. He died
Sure
in
he did.
Indianapolis.
No. They lived in New York for a while.
Really, did they?
He had a grocery store in the Rockaways.
Really?
I remember
didn't
because
know
I think
that.
I have memories of seeing him in New York.
Oh, they came to visit often.
No, but I remember going to like where he lived. I thought, I don't know.
No. You remember as a little kid, I took to Ronnie Goldberg's house. Ronnie Goldberg was Aunt Ed's niece. So you met him there. We used to meet him. No, they lived in New York for a few years.
Okay.
They tried to have a grocery store. They tried to open a business. I guess it didn't work. They moved back to Indianapolis. But he was living in New York. I guess there must have been.
And what
the
was
50s.
Uncle Dave and Aunt Rose doing here?
Well, Uncle Dave had many businesses.
Well, you started out as a painter.
The house painter. He
House
started out
painter.
as a house painter, and then he eventually.
By the way, he came
paint
in
store.
with the title of rabbi. He
Oh,
had
really?
grown a beard. There's a picture of him with a beard, a black beard, and the black hat. He came in as a rabbi, but I think he never practiced being a rabbi.
But he came in. None of them came in married. They came in single and they met
They're all
here.
married here. Mhm.
Okay,
In
so Grandma and Grandpa were in New York, establishing themselves, while you guys were in Indianapolis for a year.
Right, they started a little grocery store in Astoria. From the story I heard from my father, Uncle Dave loaned him $500, which must have been a fortune of money in those days. You're talking about 1937. And he opened a little grocery store on 33rd Street.
Well, I think they found the location for him too, and Rose and Uncle Dave.
Probably, Uncle
Yeah.
Dave, I'm sure. And they told him he had to, he was working Shabbos already in Uruguay.
Oh yeah.
And he felt he had to work Shabbos. But they opened a grocery store. And when we moved here, he had that little grocery store
Where was it?
on 33rd Street near 30th Avenue going to 31st, around the corner from where he eventually had his grocery store for many years, the largest store. The largest store he took over from it used to be an A&P.
Oh, really?
A small AMP.
Well, that's how A&P started.
Right,
with
a
small
small-
little grocery stores,
that's
like
right.
2 people working in it. That's
Yeah.
how it was an A&P, and I remember when he took it over and we moved all the stuff one summer. We used to move all the stuff, all the kids.
And we moved.
covered
We had already moved
in a
out of
big
that
cart.
basement apartment.